Texas. Today we'll be continuing our study in Matthew, and we will begin today in Matthew chapter 19, verse 1. We're going to read a bit, then we'll come back. And okay, Tom, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Just want to let you know, I've got my cell phone turned off.
Yes. Thank you, Tom. Yes, as a reminder, everyone in the audience. Yes. If you take your cell phones, your iPads, your tablets, your babies, anything else that cries, rings, makes noise, please either turn it off or put it in silent mode. Because I think virtually everyone in this room has some kind of Bible program or another on it, on theirs. I personally downloaded an eSword for Android, about a month ago, I'm thinking. I love it. I like it better than the one I had. Matthew 19, chapter 19, verse 1. Now it came to pass when Joshua had finished these things, that he departed from Galilee and came to the region of Judea beyond the Jordan. So in between the time of when he gave the teaching about the parable of the unforgiving servant and seeing your brother, that he's done a little traveling here. And verse 2, and great multitudes followed him, and he healed them there. Very steady pattern of multitudes following him. And the Pharisees also came to join him, testing him. And they said to him, well, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for just any reason? And he answered and he said to them, have you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female? And he said, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother to be joined with his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So then, they are no longer two, but they are one flesh. Therefore, what Yahweh has joined together, let no man separate. And then they said to him, well, why then did Moses command to give away a certificate of divorce and to put her away? And I say to you, verse 8, he said to Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, permitted you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you that whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality, and who marries another commits adultery, and whoever marries another, whoever marries her is divorced, commits adultery. And he said to him, his disciples said to him, if this is the case of the man with his wife, it is better not to marry. Words of his disciples. Joshua goes on, but he said to them, all cannot accept this same, but only those to whom it has been given. For there are eunuchs who were born thus from their mother's womb, and there are those eunuchs who were made eunuchs by men. And then there are those eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of for the kingdom of heaven's sake. And he who is able to accept it, let him accept it. Verse 13, then the little children were brought to him, that he might put his hands on them and pray. But his disciples rebuked them and said, go on, get out of here, you little whippersnapper. The master doesn't have time for you. And this, but Joshua said, let the little children come, let the little ones come to me, and don't forbid them, because for of such is the kingdom of heaven. And he laid on hands on them, and he departed from there. Now behold, one came and said to him, good teacher, what good things shall I do that I may have eternal life? And he said to him, why do you call me good? No one is good but one, that is Elohim. But if you want to enter into life, keep the commandments. Well, Bob, that's short and simple and to the point.
To the point.
Go ahead, Tom.
It occurred to me that there's a remarkable prophecy in the 3rd chapter of Jeremiah. And in verse 11 it says, Yahweh said unto me, the backsliding Israel has justified herself more than treacherous Yehuda or Judah, and proclaim these words toward the north, and said, return, you backsliding Israel, says Yahweh, and I will not cause my anger to fall upon you, for I am merciful, says Yahweh, and I will not keep anger forever. This is very much in keeping. We were reading about this musing of the disciples over the idea of divorce and what was allowed. Verse 13 says, only acknowledge your lawlessness or iniquity, that you have transgressed against Yahweh your Elohim, and has scattered your ways to the strangers under every green tree, and you have not obeyed. This keeps coming out in the scriptures. Have not obeyed my voice, says Yahweh. And notice verse 14. It seems so contradictory. Turn, O backsliding children. Now it's generalized. Children, says Yahweh. For I am married. This is a prophecy unto you. And I will take you one of a city and two of a family, and I will bring you to Zion or Zion. And I will give you shepherds according to my heart, which shall feed you with knowledge and understanding. So it goes on to say here that it's even discussing the Ark of the Covenant. We were talking earlier with some brethren about the Ark of the Covenant. Notice verse 16. This is very profound. Jeremiah 3:16 says, it shall come to pass when you be multiplied and increased in the land in those days. This is a future prophecy, says Yahweh. They shall say no more the Ark of the Covenant of Yahweh. Neither shall it come to mind, neither shall they remember it, neither shall they visit it, neither shall be done any more. So whatever's going to be involved in the future about the Ark of the Covenant, there's a point where there's a cutoff. I don't say that I understand all this, but it's very emphatic that this emphasis on the Ark of the Covenant reaches a point where it's not even something to be considered in the future. But the heart of this is that Yahweh hates putting away, according to Malachi 2, because he's concerned about the next generation of children as you go on and read in Malachi 2. He despises divorce, but he allows it. But he promises in the future he's going to give shepherds after his own heart. The implication we can infer from this, there's been shepherds in the past, but they have not tragically been after his own heart. Excuse me.
Okay, let's go back to Matthew 19. Thank you, Tom. Let's see now. Honor your father and your mother, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Verse 20. Now the young man said, well, all these objects.
Where are we?
We're back in Matthew 19.
Verse what?
19.
Oh, I got lost. Yeah. Okay.
Honor your father and your mother, and love your neighbor as love yourself. The young man answering, when Joshua tells him to keep the commandments, asks, well, which ones? Well, I think we'll come back to that, but we'll come back to that, which ones. Joshua said to him, if you want to be perfect, go and sell what you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. And come follow me. But when the young man had heard this saying, he went away sorrowful, because he had many possessions, great possessions. And Joshua said to the disciples, assuredly I say to you that it is hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. I say to you again, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of Yahweh. When his disciples heard it, they were greatly astonished, and saying, well, who can be saved then? Who then can be saved? But Joshua looked at them and said to them, with men this is impossible, but with Yahweh all things are possible. Then Peter answered and said to him, well, look, see, we've given up everything. We've left everything to follow you. Therefore, what will we have? So Joshua said to him, Assuredly, I say to you that in the regeneration, or in the resurrection, when the Son of Man sits on the throne of his glory, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the tribes of Israel. And everyone who has left houses, brothers, sisters, father or mother or wife or children or lands for my name's sake shall receive 100-fold and inherit eternal life. But many who are first will be last, and the last first. Okay? Right here, I'm going to open up to any questions or comments anyone may have about this passage. Okay, we're going to start with Larry in the back. He's got his hand up first.
Do you mind if I go back to the beginning of the chapter?
Go ahead. Yeah, feel free.
Yeah, so here in the beginning of chapter 19, we can see that the Pharisees came unto Joshua, tempting him, saying, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? And in verse 4 it says, and he answered and said unto them, have you not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female? And so Joshua was going back to Genesis, saying there was only two creations. There was only a male and a female. Do you know how many sexual orientations there are today, sexual genders today?
I can't keep up.
72, I looked it up.
What?
70.
Okay.
I never heard of that before, but there's 72, so it doesn't, I mean, here is such a perversion that's happened in the world in the last days, these days in which we live. Now, they faced a lot of things similar like that back then because the Romans practiced some very untasteful things, you know. But here, Joshua was pointing out the divine principle. There's only one man and there is one wife. They're to marry, and it's a lifelong commitment, and the blessings that would come from that lifelong commitment. But yet the world has changed, you know, and now we see the world, they insist that, well, hey, I was born a male, but I can swim against all these female swimmers, okay, out there in an Olympic pool, things like that. So there's a great chasm of what Yahweh and Yahshua originally started versus what the devil has created in the world today.
Well, every bit of his other 70 genders, they're all, number one, they're all of man's creation from his own imagination. And besides, certain ones, especially with this gender identity of like guys identifying as female so they can swim against the other females, you know why they do that? I can tell you why. It's very simple. It's because at that level of competition, they've reached a level of their competition. They realize that they can't compete anymore, so they identify something else to continue their ability to compete.
But that's where man also tries to accommodate people's.
We have to accommodate their feelings.
Exactly, because no one's willing to anymore and say, this is wrong.
Yeah.
Well, though,
It's wrong. Guess what? You're in trouble.
oh yeah, there are lots of people who have, you know, the spine and the backbone enough to step up and say this is wrong. But what happens to them? They get shouted down and called haters and everything else.
What's right is now wrong, what's wrong is now right.
Mm-hmm.
So the emperor has no clothes.
Pretty much, Tom. Pretty much.
We have an irony before there was ever the 72 gender bending category. Some of you may already know this. In Islam, the promise of someone who dies in a jihad against infidels, they get 72 virgins. Hello? I mean, madness in this world.
Anyone else have any question or comment about what we've read? Let's look at verse 4 more. He answered them and said, have you not read that he who made them in the beginning became male and female? That's in the creation chapter in Genesis. Larry's already pointed them out. That was in day 6 of creation, which he created them both male and female. Let's turn there for a moment. Hold your place in Matthew 19, please. Let us go back to creation for just a minute.
What we doing again?
We're going back to Genesis. All the way back. We're going back to the creation chapters. Verse 1, Genesis 1, verse 26 is where Yahweh says, let us make man in our own image. Verse 126, according to our likeness, let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over the cattle of all every creeping thing above the earth. So he created man in his own image. Of Elohim he created him. Male and female he created them. Then Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over every other living thing that moves on the earth. Goes on through the rest of the chapter. Then dropping down into verse 2, we get a short recap. The first few verses of chapter 2, we get a short, brief recap of chapter 1. Verse 7, and Yahweh formed man of the dust of the ground, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. Then Yahweh entered a garden, eastward in Eden, and he put there the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground Yahweh made every tree grow that was pleasant to the sight and good for food, and the tree was also in the midst of the garden, the tree of the good knowledge and good and evil, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And out of the river went out of Eden to water the garden, and it came, and from there it parted and became 4 riverheads. And let's drop down to fast forward a little bit. Verse 15, then Yahweh, fast forward to verse 15, Yahweh took the man and put him in the garden of Eden to tend it. And Yahweh commanded the man, saying, of every tree in the garden you may eat freely, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you will not eat of it, or shall not eat of it, for in that day you eat of it, you will surely die. And then Yahweh says, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him. Out of the ground, Yahweh formed every beast of the ground and the air, and he brought to Adam to see what he would call them. He brings all the animals, all the critters to him, and what Adam called them, that was its name. He gave names to all the cattle, the birds of the air, the fish, seed, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helper comparable to him. And we move back up to verse 15, or back up not verse 15, but to verse 18. Yahweh says it is not good that the man should be alone. I'll make a helper comparable to him. Now, in all his divine wisdom, from the individual who created all things, from what we can tell nothing, wrote all the laws, scientific laws, mathematics, all the complex laws to make this universe work and this earth work. He knew that from the start. So why would he wait till this juncture in the account to tell Adam, or to make the statement, there is no helper comparable to him. We need to make him one. Then he has Adam name all the critters and all the animals of the field, the birds of the air, and so forth. Larry, any thoughts or ideas?
Yeah, well, here's just an ideal. Okay, I truly believe that Yahweh, as well as Joshua, had planned from the very beginning that there would be a human race that would be under their obedience. But he created Adam first, and he probably trained Adam because he would be the head of the family that would come about.
Mm-hmm.
And he spent time one-on-one, so to speak, with Adam to train him, bringing all these animals and things like this and really teaching him. And so we know that obviously for them to have a family, he would need a helpmate, he would need a soulmate, he would need a wife that would progenerate the children that would come. Because remember, when he did bring the woman to the man, he gave him the scriptural admonishment that they were to fill the earth, okay, and subdue it and have dominion over the earth. This is before they ever sinned. There was the purpose that the earth would be filled with righteous people that would be generated from Adam and Eve. And if they had never sinned, guess what? Adam and Eve would still be alive today with us on earth.
In short, Larry, then show was he wanted Adam to learn that. Yahweh knew that from the very beginning. But he wanted to teach that to Adam. Adam needed to learn that because he was flesh. That was a lesson Adam needed to learn. That's why. So he goes on, the rest of the chapter goes on how he created Eve, his wife. And verse 22, then I noticed he took, let's look at something here. He gave the names, verse 21. Then Yahweh caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs, he closed up the flesh in its place. And the rib from which Yahweh Adonai had taken, he formed a man and made to a woman. And he brought it to the man, and Adam said, well, now this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, and she will be called woman because she was taken out of man. And therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and they will become one flesh. The word here is echad. That means more than just one flesh. That means also in mind, in spirit, intent, in will, beliefs, understanding. Whatever else we can all think of. We could discuss what that might mean all day. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother, and they'll be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. So Joshua makes this little teaching moment here with his critics. Back to chapter 19 of Matthew, please. So from the very beginning, that was never the intent. But there's also something very interesting here in this short little passage we've read so far. And he said to them, have you not read? Back to verse 4 in chapter 19. He answered and said to them, have you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female? Is this I think all of us here know the answer to this, but
It's called anatomically correct.
well, correct, Bob. But
Come on, Mr. Barber.
it says, he who answered them. And he answered and said, have you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female? For this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So who was it that made them then? He who made them. This is very pertinent. Yeah. Okay, Larry.
Well, technically, it was Joshua.
That's right.
He was the creator.
That's answered. Yeah, hold your place here. Let's go to John 3. So we're going to go to John 3. Or not John 3, John 1. I don't know why I said 3. John 1. First chapter of John. Hold your place in Matthew 19. John 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim. In the beginning, he He was in the beginning with Elohim. And all things were made. All things were made through him. And without him there was nothing that was made. And in him was life. And the life was the light of men. And the light that shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not comprehend it. He was there in the very beginning. Let's back up to Genesis 1. Yes, David.
I don't know if I was hoping you go to Colossians 1:16 and 17.
Go ahead and read it while you're there.
Let me get there. Colossians 1, verses 16 and 17. Colossians 1:16 says, "For by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by him and for him.
For him.
That was good.
And he is before all things, and by him all things consist. He is before everything, and by Yeshua all things
Things were
exist."
created.
Well, that ought to be right in John 1:1.
Genesis
People
1.
would understand it.
Genesis 1:26. Then Elohim said, "Now let us make man in our image, to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds, the cattle, all the earth, and all the other creeping thing that creeps on the earth." He says, let them make them in our image. So who's it? Now, is somebody out there just talking to himself? Or is there a divine conversation going up back and forth? Kathy, you had something?
Oh, I was just, sorry, I didn't
No,
know.
that's all right. That's all right.
He's talking to the Father.
Yes. There's a father and son conversation going through. The Father and the first of all creation are having a conversation about what to do next.
But even at that, he still, when he came, it was one of his jobs,
That's
was to
correct.
introduce mankind to the Father. But here's the Father in the Old Testament.
Yeah, imagine
You're
that.
without excuse if you don't understand that there are two characters.
Well, when we consider David's prayer to Yahweh over the congregation in 2 Samuel, does he not tell us that, "Oh Yahweh, you are our Father"?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he does. I believe it's in Isaiah, where the prophet says, "Oh Yahweh, undoubtedly you are our Father." So this idea of knowledge of the Father is not new. It was very old, but it had been forgotten over many years. Between all the apostasy and the rebellion, the scattering of all the tribes, both the house of Israel and the house of Judah, the division of the two houses, that information had been forgotten and lost. And one of Joshua's missions, amongst other things, was to seems to restore that knowledge. Yes, Larry.
In Isaiah chapter 9, and this is a prophecy about the future, it says, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. And the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty El, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace." And the reason he would be able to be called the Father is because he was the one that created mankind.
Mm-hmm.
And we would look to him as a father, but of course he has a father.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good. That was, I really go for that explanation.
That's
It's very
excellent.
clear.
Anyone else?
I tangled with that one for quite a while. not fully understanding it, but yeah, he was the creator. John 1:1 again.
In
Tom?
John 14 and verse 11, it says, "Believe me," Yahshua says, "that I am in the Father, and the Father in me." How plain is that? "Or else believe me for the very work's sake. Truly, truly, verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believes on me, the works that I do, he shall do, and greater works than he shall do, because I go unto my Father." So he's so closely identifying himself with the personality of Yahweh Elohim the Father, that it's like they're two peas in a pod, they're one and the same. That's why he tells Philip a little bit earlier in the same chapter, just show us the Father and that's sufficient. And it's almost like with exasperation, I don't want to expand on this too much. Philip, I've been with you so long, will you understand? When you've seen me, you've seen the Father. We're so in a cod, in such a state of unity. It's as good as if he's right here with you when you see me.
Well, in the conversation, at least we have one plus side for Philip. At least something got through to him. Show us the Father, he says. At least there's one that we know about that figured that out, that had that figured out at that time. There were still things he did not know and understand. Granted, due to Yahshua's answer.
If he'd considered Proverbs 3, verse 3 and 4, I believe it is, it clearly says, questioning us about the one who has the very weather in his fist and all that. What is his name
yes.
and what is his
Let's go to Matthew 30, verse 4, yes.
and
Let's
what
go.
is his, and what is his son's name?
What is his son's name?
If you can tell.
Tell me if you even know, yes.
If you even know that.
Yeah, Bob remembers the day I walked in the Sabbath I'd walk in after I discovered that.
It's by a prophet. His name is Agur.
And I know Bob remembers the calm, stately manner in which I've come to him. I said, Bob, here's something I discovered. We were studying names at the time. I said, here, what do you make of this? No, I wasn't very calm and stately about it, was I?
No, not at all.
No. Okay, I was bouncing off the walls, all right?
I'm
Well, it's
confused.
one of
Why?
the, it's one of the several clues that you will find in the what they call the Old Testament, in the Scripture.
In the Tanakh,
Mhm.
Yeah, but for some reason, there is a whole segment, one gigantic religion that can't seem to understand what they're reading in their own book. Oh, Judaism.
Sandra, you have your hand?
Yes, what was that?
That was Proverbs 30, verse 4.
Yeah, 30, I said 30, but it's 30 verse 4. 30 verse 4.
Yeah, because we have, let's go ahead and turn there and read it. Let us go. I meant to include that. Thank you for the reminder, Tom. Proverbs 30, verse 4. Who has ascended into heaven, or who has descended? Who has gathered the wind in his fist? Who has bound the waters in a garment and established all the ends of the earth? Going right back to this conversation and creation. And what is his name and what is his son's name, if you even know? No, Bob, you're right. I was bouncing off the walls. We were doing a study of the names on the time. We were still using the old traditional names, and we were debating, studying the proper names at the time. And I remember the time, I don't remember exactly when, but I remember when I discovered I came in the next Sabbath. I wanted to remain calm and stately and ask what, but it was more like, Bob, damn it, it's late, huh? I couldn't even speak straight.
That was a good representation.
And Bob testifies that is a very good representation.
Yeah, that's about right. Wow.
So you were excited, I'm sure.
Oh, I was quite excited. I couldn't contain myself. That's a very good way of putting it. I was so excited I couldn't even hardly contain myself.
pivotal point in many people's lives is they can go to church all they want, okay? And they could go to a church that they claim that is the church that God uses, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But once an individual comes to the realization that, that the Elohim, the Father, has a proper name.
Mm-hmm.
He may have many titles, but there's only one name. And once they learn that the Father has a name, and really mankind under the ruse of Satan has changed where we wouldn't recognize that name. That's why they use the word G-O-D or L-O-R-D. You know, they don't want you to know that name.
Mm-hmm.
But once you recognize that name, it's just like putting a key in a lock and turning it, and it unlocks the scriptures for you.
His
Any-
name's not God, we know that.
We know that, that's correct.
It's not his title either.
Well,
Anyone
it-
else?
It makes it real plain, he's jealous for his name.
Mm-hmm.
You know, don't mess with it.
The old King James Bible has the name of the Lord in it 6 times, and they misuse that name. They don't even use the correct name. They use Jehovah instead of Yahweh in the old King James Bible. But throughout the scriptures, it's 6,823 times that the divine name is used just in the Hebrew scriptures, much less. And we know that 80% of the New Testament is quotes from the Old Testament. And so we know when Joshua or the disciples, the apostles, quoted the Hebrew scriptures, there's no doubt that they would have said that name.
Oh, undoubtedly.
Well, the Jews early on tried to change it. Because of what happened over there in Jeremiah.
Right.
That is the ineffable name. You don't say that name. Well,
So they say,
Sorry.
yes.
no name, no power.
So, okay, Tom.
I talked to a rabbi years ago who was appeared to believe that Yahshua was the Messiah, but he said, in my understanding from the Tanakh, that there is what's called the ineffable or inexpressible name that is also connected with the fact that those of the Israelites today in Israel, they are very circumspect about 2 things that cause captivity of Yahweh's people. And that was idolatry and Sabbath breaking. But part of the idolatry was that they were supposedly, by their own human reasoning, not supposed to use that name. And Bob Whitmer told me years ago when he was in Israel, and you can fill in the blank, Bob, I don't want to take away from what you told me exactly, except that an individual privately acknowledged the name, but publicly, to this very day, they fulfill that prophecy, and they won't
Mhm.
speak that name in Israel. Did I get that basically right, Bob?
Well, that's right. And the year before that, we were looking at the mannequin, the model of the mannequin of the high priest, and they were showing us the crown, and the lady, she was about 22 years old, be my guess. She said, and that says, "Holy to the I Am." And our tour guide, who knew that we were into the names, and also was, he was a Jew, but he was by race. But anyway, he said, "That's not what that says." And she comes screaming, literally yelling across the room with her hands up in the air. "Don't say it. Don't say
Don't
that."
say it, wow.
That says Yahweh. And that was the end of the tour.
That
They
was
ran-
off,
they ran
Bob.
right out the door.
Yeah, I know. Leave it to Bob to end the tour. Okay, Larry.
No,
then
I
what we-
didn't have anything to do with it.
Oh, you didn't do it this
Tour guide
time.
did it.
Oh, you didn't do it this time. Okay. My
So,
bad.
But no, the young man at the next year I was there in the year 2000, and I went into the curator of the temple, what do they call it, where they're putting together the treasures of the temples. That's kind of what it was called. And there was a rabbi talking to some young ladies in there, and I was just wandering around. They finally left, and the curator, young guy, about maybe 20, 24, came over and says, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yeah, I was looking for the mannequin with the crown." He says, "Right above your head. It's up on the shelf." Sure enough, there it was. And I asked him, I said, "Would you mind if I say that name, because I believe I know what it is?" And he said, "We don't say that."
There you go.
I really understand that. And so he finally said, "Okay, all right, you say it." So I said that, I pronounced it Yahweh. He said, "It's absolutely correct. We don't say that." He said, told me that when he is at the Wailing Wall down there, he says, "I use that silently." But that is correct. In the story.
Okay, Larry?
So in John 17, we know that Joshua is making a prayer
Mm-hmm.
to the Father. And in verse 6, and this is a pivotal scriptural point that we could use with people. Because in verse 6 it says, Joshua says, in his prayer to his Father, now he's in prayer here. He says, "I have manifested thy name unto the men which thou gavest me out of the world, thine that they were, and thou givest them me, and they have kept thy word." A little bit more modern translation which says, "I have made your name known to those whom you gave me from the world. They were yours, and you gave them to me, and they have kept your word."
Well, let's drop down to verse 26 while we're there. "And I have declared to them your name, and I will declare it, that the love which you love me may be in them, and I in them." There's your akkad. It's not just, that's right, it's not two, it's one, and it's not just in flesh, it's in spirit as well. While we're in John, because it's still going to have something pertinent here to say in this portion of the text. Let's turn to John 8. Back to verse 4. It says, "Have you not read that he who made them at the beginning, made them male and female?" So we're still a little bit more on who this is, but let's turn to John 8, please. And this verse 38. "I speak what I have seen with my Father." John 8:38. "I speak what I have seen with my Father." So what does this mean? I mean, he was with the Father. This and other scriptures pieced together indicate, yes, that he was with the Father, and the individual who was there, this first of all creation, Joshua, who saw and witnessed all this creation. He was there at the very beginning. He was in their midst of all these people. He was in their midst, yet they rejected him. He's even sharing with them the Father's wisdom. Remember, this was all from the Father. Because later on in the same text, in John 8, you'll read that he's not speaking his own words, but his Father's words. And that's the original intention, was that the two be together as one.
One of the things let me make a comment here. One of the things that I find is the most difficult for anybody to seem to understand is that the Father is a separate individual. And that Messiah, I think I've lost a little bit of what I was going to say up in my brain here. But anyway, the fact is that there are two beings, and one of them was just simply not known in general. And that's one of the major missions of the two missions. He came to preach the gospel, and the
Yes.
other one's to introduce the Father.
Introduce the Father to
Mhm.
the world.
Or reintroduce the Father, if you
So
will,
that,
yes.
that's the main message he had. People just seem to, it just goes right over their head. But he introduced us to the Father.
And remember, this information was not,
Oh, I know what I was,
Okay.
I wanna finish this up.
go ahead.
So the fact is that Joshua was, permit me to use this word, the God of the Old Testament. He was the mighty
The
one.
mighty one, the
of
Elohim,
yeah,
what, yeah.
that did the creating in the first place,
Mm-hmm.
and did everything with ancient Israel, all the way up until the decision was made that he would become a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And he became a human being through some method that we don't know. But he was born flesh and blood, just like any other kid.
Mm-hmm.
Grew up and had his mission and ended up being murdered.
Well, we're told that he was born as a child, and he reduced himself to that, gave up all his past glory, and made himself subject to his own creation. And look what happened to him. Tom, you had your hand up?
I can say that when I read years ago the mentality of the final solution of the Holocaust of the Jews, they had a fundamental redacting or removal of portions here in John, so that when you read here where Joshua tells them, "You're of your father, the devil," they said, "You see, and these people are demon seed." And yet, in the same chapter, which they cut out and brought forth a cascade of bloodbath in Europe, it clearly states by Joshua's own words that there is a Father. There is one who, well, in verse 44 is what the Nazis come up with. "You are of your father, the devil, and the lust of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. And when he speaks a lie, he speaks of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it." But in the same chapter, he acknowledges that clearly there was the seed of Abraham physically, of which they as Jews were part of that genealogy.
Mm-hmm.
It's so evident how the Nazis clearly purged
Twisted
that
his-
out when they were promoting, you've got this demon seed, they're just useless eaters and all that.
Mhm.
It was a fundamental rationale for their point of justification for initiating, gassing, murdering, whatever, those of Judea, of the Jews.
Welcome Islam to that.
Yeah, we toss in Islam to that. And this demon seed was not a new teaching on their part. But someone had some way somehow discovered this very old teaching, and they put it to good use. They kicked it in overdrive. Yes, Sandra.
Getting back to the name, we were listening last night to this rabbi who was telling us about a minister who was defending God and JC to his congregation, and he said he had proof. And he picked up his King James Bible and said, "See, it's right here." And I believe a lot of people will do something like
Yeah.
that.
Right there in the King James.
It's right there. Oh, if it's good enough for Jesus and them their apostles, why ain't it good enough for us? I mean, I've heard that said before. Yes, I mean, we got preachers out there today that still believe that the King James Bible was the one. It's the only true inspired Bible, and all the others are fake and phony. And we got people that believe that Joshua and his disciples went around with a King James Bible. I know that's true because I've heard that. I've heard something very similar with that with my own ears. Now I know there's at least one other in this room who's heard that kind of. Here, get your hand up. Who else has heard this kind of nonsense? Tom, Sandra, Bob. Okay, both John and Sandra. So yes, I'm not alone. John.
You know, a lot of people don't even know the history of King James. They don't know his history, his background, anything. You know, but the fact that he was a king That was
Yeah.
enough for them.
Well, most people don't even understand that the King James most commonly held in front by most people today is in fact a revision of 1732, not the original 1611.
But can I say
Okay,
something?
Kathy, then Larry,
I have
then Raquel.
I have so much confusion because wasn't visiting you back in those days when y'all studied the names, but
Mhm.
I continually hear, and I've heard it already today, you're talking about Yahweh, I'm sure of that, but you're using the title God to reference Yahweh, not you personally, but that's confusion, and if I was listening to your broadcast, I would be confused. Because if I'm gathering it right, you started this group because you found out about the name, or well, you're in this group and then you came to study the name, right, or not?
Yeah, yes, we were part of a larger group, and we had a split, a division over the issue of the name.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those who continued to use the old traditional names, if you will, for lack of a better phrase, they went their way. Those who adopted who learned and accepted the true names, we went another way.
Yeah, that was,
That's pretty much how it went,
But do you,
in a nutshell.
I guess
22
my
to
basic
11.
question, do you feel like it honors Yahweh when we refer to him as our God? I personally do not,
no, well, no, it's almost.
but yet you
an-
do it,
It's almost an insult.
but you just did it.
Yeah, well, it's a word. It's
But
just a word.
But does it honor Yahweh? That's my
No,
question.
it does not.
Can you think
It's
of
not
another?
descriptive. There are lots of gods.
Well, every word in our English language is corrupted some way, somewhere, somehow.
Yeah.
Even, it would make it very difficult to refer to Yahweh as the Almighty, because even our definite word, a definite article in the English language, the. We can't even say that because even that's corrupted.
That's a stretch, but, what is that, how do you interpret Isaiah 65:11? There's 3 deities mentioned in that verse, Isaiah 65:11.
Let's
I can't
read it.
bring it to mind.
Let's
Can
read
you
it.
read that?
Let's read it. Curtis?
Okay.
I'm gonna go there too. Isaiah.
65:11.
65.
But Isaiah 65:11. But you are those who forsake Yahweh, and who forget my holy mountain, who prepare a table for Gad, and who.
No, it's God. There is no at in
Mhm.
Hebrew, so the correct should be God. Okay,
Okay, who furnish a drink offering for many.
and then, yes.
Many,
That's
I'm not sure how
another-
that's.
another
I'm
false
still
view.
lost.
There's the true there's Yahweh, the true Almighty, and there's 2 other deities mentioned, and one is, God, and the other one's many.
The question would be, which translation would it
Oh,
have
we
that?
talk fortune and destiny.
But that's a, what do you call it, a translation, not a,
I don't know, I'm just reading the World English Bible.
it's a name, it's a proper name, and proper names aren't supposed to be translated, they're supposed to be transliterated.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. In Isaiah 65:11, in reading it from the King James, what different translation has a name and where in that particular verse?
Well, mine also says truth, but if I look at 1409, in the Hebrew dictionary, 1409 says, God.
So
And it
the
says
word
it's a
true
deity-
is,
It's a deity of fortune,
Oh, I see.
and then many is 4507 in the dictionary. I just have.
My Bible says thou usest forsake Yahweh. And forget.
Yahweh is correct, that's 3068, it's the 1409 Many is also deity of fortune, it's not a number. It says number in your King James, and the first one is truth. Do you see it?
The scriptures version also says the same thing.
So it says what?
It says Gad, which when you mention that, you go to both the Strongs and the Hebrew, it also says God,
God.
G-A-W-D.
Well, pronounce
That's
God,
how you pronounce
because
it,
there's
right.
no "at"
Same
in
thing.
Hebrew, or in Greek, or in Spanish.
And then many the same way, that is another name.
Well, that's the same word. It's also the same word for the son of Jacob.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, but, and where was Leah? Where was she from? I mean, they were idol worshipers. Can we agree on that? And she
Oh,
said-
just like their daddy Laban, most likely.
Huh?
Just,
Like Laban. And when she gave her handmaid to Jacob and it produced God, she said, "Ba God," with God, which is with fortune. So,
I mean,
But Judah
So-
came out of her
it's,
too.
what,
Well-
the way I look at it, it's a word.
Here, hold on one
and
second.
it's
So
not, it's not
One-
the right.
one comment here is the Hebrew word G-A-W-D and the English word G-O-D,
Yeah.
we're trying to correlate those to be the same thing.
I don't
yes,
think they are.
Yahweh says you forsake, but you are they that forsake Yahweh and forget my holy mountain and prepare a table for God and furnish that drink unto many,
So G-A-W-D, God,
God.
means troop. But
No, it
G-O-W-D,
means fortune, it's a deity of fortune.
okay, so G-O-D is El, is always referenced as El. So I think phonetically, we're kind of mixing two different words, in my opinion, but that's just my opinion. And I think it's more of, if someone says something and it offends you, then was it intended to offend you, is the question that I asked?
No, it's not about, are you talking about me?
No, I'm just in general, if
Oh, I know.
anybody says anything that offends, the question is, does that person intend to do it? And then when you bring it to them, if the person that's saying it, if you're not intending to offend anyone, then it would be, behoove us to not say it anymore so that we don't offend. And so we kind of come to an amicable decision that, oh, I'm not gonna do it because I know this person, it bothers them. And then the other person is, I know when they say it, they are not meaning to bother me, so I'm not gonna take it as harsh. It's all us having relationships with each other to understand where the other person is coming from.
But
I think-
our relationship with Yahweh is the foremost, and does it offend him? Because he's the one that's speaking here.
Yeah, but my opinion of what would offend Yahweh is probably not as accurate as what Yahweh determines of what offends him. I think us not following his word and being obedient is more of an offense, right?
But
So I think we're splitting hairs here to really just, we can figure out how to be peaceable with each other, to not have to go down the road of, well, I'm right and we shouldn't do this, and, going forward, this is how I think we should be. But maybe everybody that walks through the door is not exactly where everyone in this room is.
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry, David, if I came across as, I did not mean to feel that way.
it's
Yeah.
all right, it's all right,
Yeah.
it's okay, Kathy. We're
Well,
all
I
right.
mean,
It's all right.
prayer, Yahweh answers prayers for people who uses not the right names, right?
Did
So
for
I
me
think
for
it's
many
his
years.
mercy that,
Until I knew better.
Yeah.
And so I got rid of that.
Curtis, can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
Okay. Exodus 6:3, when I read this is the account
Go
of,
ahead. Since you're there, go ahead.
yeah, Moses, when Yahweh, when he was asking for his name, right? Let's see, and Yahweh, Exodus 6:2. And Elohim spoke to Moses and said to him, I am Yahweh, and I have appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as El Shaddai, Almighty, but my name is
Mhm.
Yahweh. I was not known to them, right? So I read that, But then again, if I go to Genesis in Jacob's blessings, Genesis 49:18.
They most
Jacob
certainly
said-
knew the name, yes.
Yeah, he knew the name, so how do you explain that?
Because if you read in another translation, I believe it's called, during my study of the name, I came across what was called the Rotherham translation. And it addresses Exodus 6:3 as a question, not a statement. And if you take it as a statement, I mean, if you take it as a plain statement, we have apparent disagreements. But if it's stated or asked as a question, now we have complete agreement.
Well, except for, I would say that his name is just beyond the word itself. When he says he reveals his name, it's his character, it's his reputation, it's everything, like another side of him, right? It's all of that, right? Even like when Yeshua came, that's a different side of Yahweh that we didn't know about, right? So when, Moses delivered them, that's the first time that he showed his strength and his power to deliver his people. So I would just say that we have to kind of go beyond the name, the actual, physical name, to who Yahweh is and his character.
Well, there's a lot that his name that name entails. Well, there's so much that name entails.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying, yeah. And it will continue in the future.
Because
right?
I don't recall exactly how the Rotherham translation states it, but I seem to recall it as Yahweh addressing Moses as, "And by my name Yahweh wasn't I known by them?"
I think
Yeah,
you're right.
that's
I
not
remember
here
hearing
though, I
it
mean, I don't know
somewhere
that
else.
translation, yeah.
Okay, Larry.
Oh, I see.
The first, in the very beginning of Genesis, it uses Elohim, okay? But in the second chapter, it begins using the name Yahweh, okay? And so the patriarchs knew of the name, and it's interesting, in Exodus 6:3, where she's talking about here in the RSV, it says the patriarchs did not understand the name as representing his character and power, as did Moses and the Israelites after witnessing their deliverance from Egypt. The NIV note says it does not necessarily mean that the patriarchs were totally ignorant of the name Yahweh, but it indicates that they did not understand its full implications as the name of the one who would redeem his people. And so that's real interesting. And so, after almost 63 years, there's times that I will say G-O-D, okay, or L-O-R-D, okay, because it's just been written in my brain. But I well know that the vast majority of people, if you say the word God, they're not thinking of a deity of fortune.
All right.
They're thinking of the supreme one of the universe that is above all and that created all and understands all. And so there are those who teach the Hebraic way, okay, the Messianic way. And in the very beginning of their teachings, they talk about God did this and Jesus Christ did this, and then they make a transition. They said, we need to talk about why we need to use the proper names.
That's
Then-
what happened here.
And they make a transition.
That's exactly what happened here, Larry.
Yeah,
Yes.
they make a transition. So, I don't, if I'm talking to somebody and they're talking about God and Jesus Christ, a lot of times I'll talk on their level so that we can establish
You gotta communicate.
because they understand, I understand when they're talking about Jesus Christ, I understand that I also know him as Joshua, okay? And I know the reason his real name is Joshua. They don't, but it's my opportunity to help them to come to that knowledge.
Yeah, and to add to that, Larry, and the other side of that is when everybody walks in this building, we are trying to be mindful to use the names because we've committed to that as who he is. That's Yahweh and that's Yeshua. If at any point we accidentally say God or Lord or Jesus, I know I'm not perfect, and I think I've gotten up there and accidentally said God. It's just, like you said, something that has been ingrained in our minds since we were born to hear those things, and to accidentally say it is not something that we're intentionally trying to do.
Yes, I think it could be safely said that for some, it's just pure habit. It's kind of like, when a doctor whacks you in the knee. Yeah. But we still have people at various levels of understanding about this issue. And we have newer people here who have not come to a full appreciation, a full understanding. And they're still trying to work that one out. And with these folks, old timers like myself and Bob and Dennis we're just going to have to be patient. We need to exercise. Thank you, David. We need to exercise patience because we were there at one time too.
We're all striving for perfection.
Okay, we're near the time to close it, but we'll get to. Okay, Lee, go ahead.
Well, and I was just thinking about how Yeshua handled this situation here in Matthew 19 when his crowds were here and these Pharisees came and said, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? He could have just said no, but he didn't. He started and gave a basis of the truth, and then they said, well, why did Moses do it? And then he was able to explain that. So I really appreciate his patience with people and how he laid a foundation to give them the proper answer. And sometimes that's what we have to do that. I know even at work, it's like I asked somebody the other day, are you taking off for the holidays? And I knew where that conversation was going because they said, no, are you? And I said, no, because I don't celebrate the holidays. And so it gives us an opportunity for teaching them to be able to.
Well, there's a reason to ask this question, and time's not going to permit to go into it, but maybe whoever picks this up next week can go into a little bit more detail. And reasons varied from a bad meal to like having the mashed potatoes running like coffee and your coffee coming out thick like mashed potatoes. Get out of here. You're no good. Scram. Beat it. Wife, here's your get. Now get. Okay, Larry, then we need to close.
Real quick, Revelation 22, okay, in verse 4, it says, and they shall see his face, and his name shall be in their foreheads. And so that means that every person alive at that point will have that understanding.
We'll have that name. And we're not going to have a dozen names. We're not going to have, it's not going to be, it's going to be that one name. Okay, Raquel?
Just very quickly, I mean, Paul even used it as a teaching instrument in Paul 17 when he stood in the midst of, Areopagus and said, men of Athens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then to the unknown mighty one, then he starts talking about Yahweh, right? I was actually surprised before when I first read that, but,
Mm-hmm.
use it as a
Paul,
teaching instrument.
he has a teaching moment.
Yeah, this is his teaching moment. Then he starts talking about Yahweh.
Then he narrows it down very quickly. Okay, we need to close. We're out of time here.
Yep. We're
So
good.
Good study.
we'll be back at 3 o'clock, and David Gibson will have the main message for us today.
I
Hello.
was gonna grab it before, I can wait. No,
I'm about to push a couple of buttons, but go ahead.
Kathy sent me this.
Who's Kathy?
Kathy, it was just, and I wasn't sure of the answer, and when I looked up, this is what she sent me. And when I looked it up, I thought it was conjunction, but I wasn't sure, so I wanted to check with you.
Conjunction, so I don't know. Is she asking about when the count starts?
I think so, on counting
Yeah.
with the.
So we don't use a crescent here now.
When I looked it all up, I saw that the crescent was mostly used by
So you mind?
Hindus and,
Yeah. So,
oh, that was just, she'd asked me something about that, Rabbi.
so
So when I looked
it
at
goes back to
conjunction.
the original question, and people get into the definition of what's this, what's that, which can be interpreted, many different things. Let's talk plainly, in my opinion. Vernal equinox happens, right? After the vernal equinox, it's the new moon on or after the vernal equinox that starts to count. My idea of a new moon is totally dark.
Yes, that's what made me go to conjunction. I remembered you telling me that
Yes.
before.
And
And I
so-
looked it up and it said, there's no reflection.
If you have a crescent, you have a little sliver,
Yeah.
you can see you missed it.
Yeah,
You're either before if you see the sliver before, you're either after if you see the after. That is not a new moon.
yeah, that's what I was,
That's as plain as you can get. I mean, it's you can say that to a 4-year-old and they will get it, right? A new moon is totally dark, and that starts from that point on. You count 14 days, and that's Passover.
'cause I remember when I looked, cause I'm like, I don't know what she's talking about.
Yeah,
Let me look
and
this
that's the
up.
thing is, like Wendy does a lot. She uses Hebrew words when you're talking. I say stop, don't do that. Don't talk
Is
to
your
me
mic
plainly.
on? We can hear you all talking.
Oh,